My wife stood in our kitchen in Tauranga and told me, "The house is in my name, Malcolm. You've got no rights here. Pack your things." She'd forgotten one small detail. That house wasn't bought. It was the grand prize in a national competition I won, and the prize contract said it couldn't be sold or transferred for 7 years, and if the winning couple separated in that time, the whole property reverted to the officially named winner. Me. She was 8 months short of the deadline. I rang the sponsor's legal department the very next morning. But let me back up, because the way she did it still sits with me. I'm 63 now. I was 61 when it happened. My wife, Lorraine, was 58, and we'd been married 22 years. She told me on a Tuesday evening, while I was still wearing my gardening gloves, that she wanted a separation. Not asked. Told. She had that flat, businesslike voice she used on tradesmen who'd quoted too high. "I've already seen a solicitor, Malcolm," she said. "There's nothing to discuss. I'm not happy, I haven't been for years, and I'm not spending my retirement pretending." I stood there with dirt on my gloves and asked if we could at least talk to someone together. A counselor. Our minister. Anyone. She laughed at me. Actually laughed. Talk? You want to talk now? No. What's going to happen is this. The house is mine. It's my name on the title, and only my name. You'll take your clothes, your tools, and that ridiculous old Uda of yours, and you'll be out by the weekend. My solicitor says you haven't got a leg to stand on. Then she said the sentence I'll remember until they put me in the ground. She looked around our beautiful living room, the one with the big windows facing the mount, and said, "You've been a guest in my house for years, love. The visit's over." Here's the thing about being my age. When you're young and someone gut punches you like that, you shout, you plead, you make a mess of yourself. By 61, you've buried your parents, you've been made redundant twice, you've sat in enough hospital waiting rooms to know what real fear feels like. So I didn't shout. I felt something go very still and very cold inside me, like a tide going out, and underneath the mud there was something hard. Because Lorraine was right about the title. And completely, catastrophically wrong about everything else. 7 years earlier, almost to the month, I'd been a semi-retired draftsman doing odd contract work, and Lorraine and I were renting a damp little unit in Greerton, watching house prices run away from us like everyone else our age who hadn't got on the ladder early. Then Coastline Building Society, one of the big ones, ran their 50th anniversary promotion. The Forever Home Draw, they called it, though it wasn't a draw at all. You had to write a proper entry, 2,000 words, on what a family home meant after a lifetime of work. There was an architectural design component too, a sketch of your ideal accessible home for growing older in. Right up my alley, 40 years of technical drawing behind me. I worked on that entry for the better part of 2 months. Lorraine thought I was daft. Nobody wins those things, Malcolm. They're for the marketing. She used to bring me cups of tea at my drawing board with this little smile, the way you'd humor a child building a raft to sail to Australia. Out of more than 40,000 entries nationwide, mine won. I still remember the phone call. I had to sit down on the back step. A brand new architecturally designed home in Tauranga, fully landscaped, worth $1.4 million even then. There was a ceremony, a camera crew, a giant cardboard key. Lorraine cried on the telly and called me her clever husband. Then came the paperwork, and this is the part one need to explain properly, because I know exactly what you're thinking. How does a man win a house and end up with his wife's name alone on the title? 2 reasons, and they made sense at the time. First, I still had a guarantee hanging over me from my late brother's failed engineering business, a debt I'd co-signed years before that hadn't fully been discharged. Second, Lorraine had worked 20 years in conveyancing. Property transfers were her bread and butter. She sat across from the Coastline lawyers, completely in her element, and she was the one who suggested it. "Put the title in my name only," she said. "Cleaner for the creditors, better for us." Her old firm handled the transfer. The coastline people shrugged and said the title could be registered however we liked, provided we both signed the master prize deed. And that master prize deed is the document that saved my life. I read it. All of it. Every schedule, every clause, sitting up 2 nights running with a highlighter, because 40 years of drafting teaches you that the small print is where buildings fall down. Lorraine didn't read it. I watched her flick to the signature page the way she'd done with 1,000 routine transfers in her career. 20 years in conveyancing had taught her that the title is everything. Whoever's on the title owns the property, end of story. That was her religion. And it's true, right up until the document that created the title says otherwise. Clause 14. Prize integrity. The home could not be sold, mortgaged further, or transferred to any third party for 7 years from settlement. And clause 14.3, the one I underlined twice, in the event the winning couple separated or divorced within that 7-year period, the property would not form part of relationship property. Full legal and beneficial ownership would revert to the registered competition winner. The registered winner, named on page 1 in capital letters, was Malcolm James Whitfield. Just me. The entry had been in my name alone. Coastline put that clause in for a simple reason, their lawyer told me much later. They'd been burned before. A prize home flicked on or carved up in a divorce 6 months after the cameras left makes a mockery of a forever home campaign. The clause existed precisely to stop what my wife was now trying to do. We'd lived in that house 6 years and 4 months. 8 months short of 7 years. So when Lorraine stood there telling me the visit was over, I had a decision to make in about 3 seconds. I could tell her about clause 14 right then and watch her ring her solicitor in a panic, and give them 8 months to think, to stall the separation, to wait the clause out. Or I could do something much harder. I looked at the floor. I let my shoulders drop. And I said, quietly, "You're right, Lorraine. It's your name on the title. I'll be out by Sunday." The relief on her face. 22 years of marriage and she didn't even try to hide it. She'd expected a battle and got a white flag, and she thought it was because I was weak. She actually patted my arm on her way past, like I was an old dog being rehomed. I packed slowly over the next few days, just enough to look broken. My daughter from my first marriage, Sharon, who's 40 up in Auckland, wanted to drive down and give Lorraine a piece of her mind. I told her to stay put. "Trust your old man," I said. Just for a few weeks. Sunday I moved into my mate Trevor's sleep out. Monday morning, 8:30 sharp, I was sitting in Trevor's kitchen with a strong cup of tea and the prize deed in front of me, and I rang Coastline Building Society and asked for the legal team. Told the young fellow on the phone I was the winner of the Forever Home draw and I needed to report a potential breach of the prize deed. There was a pause, and then he said, "One moment please," in a voice that had gone very alert. Within the hour I was speaking to their senior counsel, a woman named Margaret Aiello. She was not warm. She was something far more useful. She was interested. I laid it all out. The separation, the 8 months remaining, my wife's claim that the title made the house hers alone, her demand that I be gone. Margaret was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Mr. Whitfield, I drafted clause 14 myself, 11 years ago, after a winner in Christchurch tried something similar. Do not communicate with your wife about this. Do not respond to her solicitor. Email me the deed and your marriage details today. From this point, you are not fighting her. We are." I cannot tell you what that did for me. I'd walked out of my own home like a whipped dog, and 3 days later I had the in-house legal team of a multi-billion-dollar institution telling me they would handle it. It wasn't a knife fight anymore. Lorraine had brought a suburban solicitor to face a building society's entire legal department defending their flagship brand. The separation papers arrived at Trevor's place that Friday, and they were exactly as arrogant as I expected. The house listed as Lorraine's separate property. A demand I formally acknowledge I had no interest in it. And, this is the bit that made Trevor spit his beer, a claim for spousal maintenance, on account of the standard of living she had become accustomed to. In my house. The one I won. I didn't reply. I scanned the lot and emailed it to Margaret Aiello with one line, as discussed. What happened next I got in pieces, some from my own solicitor once I'd hired one, some from our old neighbor Barry, who has a view of our letterbox and the soul of a town crier. 10 days later a courier delivered a thick envelope to Lorraine from Coastline's lawyers. Barry texted me a photo of her standing in the driveway reading it. He said she stood there so long the sprinklers came on. That night my phone rang. Lorraine. I nearly didn't answer, but Margaret had said I could confirm facts as long as I made no agreements. She wasn't shouting. She was crying, that high, frightened crying of someone whose sums have just stopped adding up. Malcolm, what have you done? They're saying, this letter says the house reverts to you. Reverts. What is clause 14? What reversion? It's in the prize deed, love, I said. The one we both signed in front of the cameras. Sold or separated inside 7 years, the house goes back to the named winner. That's me. You're the one who chose not to wait 8 months. That's not, the title is in my name. I worked in property law for 20 years, Malcolm. The title is everything. My solicitor said, your solicitor read the title, I said. Nobody read the deed that created it. You signed a conditional prize, Lorraine, not a freehold gift. And you've just broken the condition. Then she said it. The sentence that, when I told Sharon later, made her laugh until she had to pull the car over. Lorraine wailed down the phone, you're trying to throw me out of my own home. You're trying to make me homeless. What kind of man does that? I let that sit for a second. Lorraine, I said, you gave me until Sunday to clear out of the house I won, and you patted my arm on the way past. I'm not doing anything to you. The contract is doing it. You should have read the fine print. You of all people. And I hung up, and I sat in Trevor's sleep out, and I'm not ashamed to say my hands were shaking. Not from fear. There's a particular feeling when 22 years of being underestimated comes due all at once, and it isn't joy exactly. It's more like setting down something heavy you didn't realize you'd been carrying. The next month was an education for Lorraine's solicitor. He fired back a letter arguing the reversion clause was unenforceable against a registered proprietor, unconscionable, contrary to the Property Relationships Act, the usual artillery. Coastline's response, my solicitor told me with genuine professional admiration, ran to 40-odd pages. Precedent after precedent on conditional gifts, prize contracts, constructive trusts. Their position was simple and brutal. The deed was the primary contract, the title registration was a downstream conditional transfer, and if Lorraine maintained her claim, Coastline would not only join the relationship property proceedings on my side but would consider its own action against her for attempting to convert a contractually encumbered asset. There was a phrase in there, we note Mrs. Whitfield's 2 decades of professional conveyancing experience, which makes a defense of ignorance difficult to sustain, that I am told caused her solicitor to advise settlement that same afternoon. Her claim to the house was formally withdrawn within the week. Then came the second front, because there's always a second front. Beaten on the law, Lorraine went to work on the people. She rang my own sister, if you can believe it, sobbing about how Malcolm had found some cruel loophole to steal her home of 7 years and tip her onto the street at 58. She tried it at her tennis club, at our church, with the neighbors. It didn't take. And the reason it didn't take is that everybody knew I won that house. Half of Tauranga had seen me on the regional news holding that cardboard key. Our friends had teased me for months about my homework while I wrote that entry. You can't spend 6 years telling dinner guests the story of your husband's famous competition win and then convince those same people the house was somehow yours all along. The harder she pushed that story, the smaller she looked. And then I found out why she'd been in such a hurry. Why she couldn't just wait 8 months and walk away with half of everything, clean. I'd suspected for a while there was someone. Little things. The phone face down. The new Perfume 4 book club. A weekend conveyancing conference in Wellington that didn't appear on the conference website when I idly looked it up. But suspicion isn't proof, and I'd never gone digging. I didn't have to. When I moved out, in my role as broken old Malcolm, I'd left in a hurry, and one of the things still at the house was my iPad, the one Lorraine had set up for me 2 Christmases back. Set up, as it turns out, signed into the family sharing account, with her messages syncing to it. When my solicitor arranged a supervised visit for me to collect the last of my tools and personal effects, I picked up that iPad off the hall table, put it in my carton with my drill bits, and didn't think much of it until I charged it at Trevor's that night and the screen lit up with 3 weeks of message notifications that were not mine to receive, except that legally, on my own device, on an account I co-owned, they rather were. His name was Gerald. A property developer she'd met through work, 60, divorced, the lot. It had been going on for nearly 2 years. And there it all was in their messages, the whole architecture of it. The plan was never just to leave me. The plan was the house. Gerald, it turned out, had been advising her. One message from him, sent 3 weeks before she told me to pack, I read out loud to Trevor because I couldn't quite believe it. Once the old boy's off the title question and you're free and clear, we put the Mount house on the market in spring. My agent reckons 1.9. That's our apartment in Pawn we sorted and change left over. Our apartment. They were going to sell my prize, the house I won with 2 months of work and 40 years of skill, and buy their retirement love nest with it. I sat with those messages for a long evening. I won't pretend I didn't feel sick. 2 years. But by morning the sick feeling had organized itself into something more practical. I photographed every relevant message, gave the lot to my solicitor, and asked one question, is this useful? He smiled the way solicitors smile when the other side has been claiming hardship. Mrs. Whitfield is seeking spousal maintenance and a generous division of the remaining relationship property, he said, on the basis of her sacrifice and need. Evidence that she spent 2 years and a considerable amount of your joint savings planning this with a property developer she intended to live with? Yes, Malcolm. That's useful. The settlement conference, my solicitor tells me, lasted 40 minutes. The maintenance claim evaporated the moment the messages went across the table, along with the bank statements showing what she'd quietly drawn from our joint account over 2 years. Weekends away, gifts, a deposit she'd paid on, of all things, a small boat moored at Pawnwee. She was ordered to repay her dissipation of the joint funds. She kept her car, her Kiwi Saver, her personal things, and her legal bill, which by then was substantial. The house, under Clause 14, reverted to me in full the day the separation order was sealed. Coastline's lawyers handled the title transfer themselves. Margaret Aiello told me it was the fastest piece of conveyancing of her career, and that she'd enjoyed it. And Gerald? Gerald lasted precisely as long as the $1.9 million did. Once the house was gone from the equation, so was he. The boat deposit was forfeited. Barry, my faithful town crier, reports that Lorraine is renting a 2-bedroom unit in Greerton now. 4 streets from the damp little place we started in. Life has a savage sense of symmetry sometimes. I moved back in on a Saturday in spring. Sharon came down from Auckland with my grandkids and we had fish and chips on the deck, looking out at the mount, and my granddaughter asked why I was laughing at nothing. I couldn't very well explain it to a 7-year-old. I was laughing because I was standing in the house I'd won, the house I'd nearly lost, the house a woman and her boyfriend had measured up for sale while I was still sleeping in it. A few weeks later a courier came with a parcel from Coastline Building Society. Inside was a letter from Margaret Aiello, saying the board had followed the matter with interest, that the Forever Home draw had been created for exactly the kind of person my entry had described, and that they were pleased the home remained with its winner. With it was a check, $40,000, marked for legal costs and a few improvements. I used part of it to rebuild the garden Lorraine had always called my dirt hobby. The rest went into an account for the grandkids. I'm 63, and here's what those 2 years taught me, for whatever it's worth from an old draftsman. Read everything you sign. Not skim. Read. The most important sentence of your life may be in Clause 14 on page 11, and the person who reads it owns the future, whatever the title says. Never mistake quiet for weak. Some of us went silent because we were finished. Some of us went silent because we were finally paying attention. And greed is impatient. That's its one fatal flaw. 8 months. That's all she had to wait, and she'd have walked away wealthy. But people who think they've already won always reach too early, and when they do, the only thing they really show you is what they were the whole time. She told me I was a guest whose visit was over. She forgot whose name was on the invitation. And in the end, the man who wrote his way into that house got to write the ending too. It's a good ending. I'm sitting in it right now. I still go back to that 3 seconds in the kitchen, dirt on my gloves, Lorraine patting my arm like I was an old dog being rehomed. I could have told her about clause 14 right then and felt clever for a minute. Instead I looked at the floor and said she was right. People think the win was the lawyers, or the deed, or a bit of luck. It wasn't. The win was sitting up 2 nights with a highlighter 7 years earlier, reading a contract a smarter woman than me flicked straight past to the signature page. Everything that happened afterwards was just that one quiet decision coming home, because that's how these things actually work. Nothing fell out of the sky onto Lorraine. She drew up every bit of it herself. She chose to stop reading the fine print 20 years into a career built on fine print. She chose Gerald, and the boat, and the Pawnee apartment, and she chose to do it 8 months early because she couldn't stand to wait. Greed is impatient, that's its one weakness, and impatience leaves a trail. Every consequence she suffered had her own fingerprints on the handle. If I've learned anything worth passing on, it's that 3 things will carry you when life decides to test you, and they're plainer than they sound. The first is being straight, doing right by people even when you could get away with not. I never once lied to Lorraine through any of it. I didn't have to. The truth was already on my side, sitting in a fireproof safe. When you live honest, the facts turn up as your witnesses. The second is using your head. Reading the thing in front of you. 40 years of drafting taught me that buildings fall down where nobody bothered to check the small print, and so do marriages, and so do schemes. The most important sentence of your life might be clause 14 on page 11, and the only people it rewards are the ones who slow down long enough to read it. The third is the one nobody likes, because it's just plain backbone. The willingness to go quiet and wait when everything in you wants to shout. Walking out my own front door on that Sunday, looking beaten, was the hardest thing I ever did. But there's a difference between giving up and biding your time, and only you ever really know which one you're doing. Lorraine mistook one for the other. She thought silence meant I was weak. It meant I was finally paying attention. So if you take one thing from an old man on a deck in Tauranga, take this. Stay decent, keep your eyes open, and hold your nerve. Do those 3 and the people who underestimate you will hand you the ending, gift-wrapped, every single time. Lorraine told me my visit was over. She forgot whose name was on the invitation. And the bloke who wrote his way into that house got to write the last line too. I'm sitting in it right now, and it's a good last line.